Uh-oh. Did Rolex really steal the design idea from another watch? Say it ain't so. What's up, guys? It's your boy Rich here, back at it again. And while there hasn't been a lot of chatter on this, I still thought it'd be worthwhile to talk about. And that's, did Rolex steal the design cues for their Submariner from Blancpain's 50 Fathoms? And there are two arguments in favor of Blancpain. The first argument is that they released their watch first in 1953, and the second argument is their bezel. If we look at the image for both the original 50 Fathoms and the original Submariner, there's not a lot of similarities on the dial, with the numbers or the hands or even the bracelet. But yes, there is clearly a resemblance to the bezel. An argument could be made in favor of Rolex is that they've already used the turnograph with their Oyster back in 1926. Rolex also had the experience and reputation for knowing how to seal a watch from moisture and dirt. As far as the year of 1953, it is indisputable that Blancpain released theirs first. But I think because of the proximity of how closely both watches were released in the same year, it's a little bit harder of an argument. Because granted, there weren't a lot of designs for Rolex or any watch to steal from because divers' watches were just emerging at the time. But it takes time for Rolex to agree on which design they want to steal and then enter production with it. It takes time to manufacture a watch and test a watch, especially for a diver's watch. So because both watches were released so closely, even though Blancpain came to the market first, I don't think that's strong enough of an argument. Rolex wasn't Rolex in 1953, and Blancpain never really became a household name. In fact, when we talk about watches today, it's usually Rolex or Omega or Breitling or Fossil or Tissot. It's never Blancpain. You have to be a pretty serious watch enthusiast to be familiar with the Blancpain name. And Rolex didn't become Rolex until 1962, a good 9 years after the Submariner's release date, when Sean Connery as James Bond wore the Submariner in Dr. No. But I wonder, what if Sean Connery wore the 50 Fathoms instead of the Submariner? Well, there's no reason to believe that if he wore the 50 Fathoms instead, that it wouldn't have done for Blancpain what it did for Rolex. And that would have changed the entire course of history for watches. Blancpain created the 50 Fathoms for the French frogmen, which is like the US Navy SEALs, and they started designing them or having an agreement with the French Navy in 1952. The Rolex Panerai collaboration was during World War II, which was from 1939 to 1945. And while that's neither here nor there in the case of the argument for which came first, it's just a fun bit of information. Also, Blancpain had a period of dormancy. In 1980, they actually shut their doors down for 3 years until the legendary Jean-Claude Biver bought the company and re-released the Blancpain 50 Fathoms in 1997. The Blancpain 50 Fathoms also went through over 50 versions, a lot more than a Rolex Submariner. So in this, which came first, the chicken or the egg version, I think this exercise is more for Blancpain fans and or Rolex haters who are trying to dethrone the legendary Rolex Submariner. And Blancpain's 50 Fathoms offers the best chance to carry out a worthwhile conversation. I am a real big fan of Blancpain's 50 Fathoms, but worth noting is the Submariner was a true 100 meters of water resistance, while 50 Fathoms was technically 91 meters. Not a big deal, but there's that. And by the way, today both are 300 meters of water resistance, so it doesn't matter today. And here's a fun question that I'm just making up now. Because Rolex is the most copied watch in the world under the ruse of homage and the most counterfeited watch in the world, if Rolex stole the idea for the Submariner, do they get a pass? And my answer is no, because Rolex wasn't Rolex in 1953. So speaking of the Submariner, there is some real Rolex Submariner news, and that's the great Steve McQueen, whom I just covered in my last Hoyer video. His 5513 Submariner is hitting the auction blocks on October 25th, and this is interesting because his watch wasn't part of McQueen's estate, and that's because he gifted it to his stuntman, Lauren James, who passed away in 2017, and it was inscribed as "To the best damn stuntman." And this watch was found in James's house, which was a victim of one of the California wildfires. And the Rolex team restored this watch back to its former glory, but they still left some soot on the dial and the movement to add character. It was obviously not enough to cause any damage to the watch. Otherwise, the Rolex team would have cleaned it up completely. And it is expected to fetch between $300,000 to $600,000. And we all know about Newman's Daytona, which earned about 14.6 before the fees. And I know Newman is much more beloved overall, especially with all of his charity work and his Newman Foods line of products. But to me, McQueen's celebrity was just as big. So I hope his watch earns a lot more than $600,000. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you the next time. So if Blancpain's 57 fathoms, and then in 1980, Jean-Claude Van, so in 1980, the five fathoms had over 50 versions. The 50 fathoms had over the 50 fathom. Take a time.